Hello and welcome back to RetroHaven, guys. In the last video we have checked the improvements of gameplay that Capcom brought to the table, and in this video we will check how many ports this Resident Evil 2 had and how many amazing systems were the host of this fantastic game. With that said, this is Daniel from RetroHaven and welcome to Resident Evil 2 Retrospective. Okay guys, as we have talked before, Resident Evil 1 was ported to almost everything, including my grandma's fridge. And I personally believe that Resident Evil 2 will take the same treatment by Capcom. But pretty much to my surprise, there were not that many ports for this awesome game. But we will take a look at them right now. The first thing that I want to talk about is the original version was PlayStation 1 version, and we don't consider PlayStation 1 version in here, but we might took it as a reference to compare some of the aspects of the game to that original version. The first set of ports that we want to take a look is PC version. Unfortunately, the PC version of this game did not age well. We have a version which is similar for Windows 95 and 98, but unfortunately it's a horrible thing to run this game on modern hardware, because you cannot run it at all without any modification. The amazing hardware that was needed for this game was beyond my belief at that time and very funny at the current time. At that time you had to have something like 32 megabytes of RAM to run this game, and your processor should have something like 200 megahertz of power, which is quite lame in today's standard, but back then, believe me, it was a huge amount of money needed to pay for such system. Obviously, I don't know how I ran it on a system with 24 megabytes of memory, but finally I was able to play this amazing game on the PC with all its glory. Graphic-wise, it was not that different from Resident Evil 2 on PlayStation, but I feel that there were some, amazing little things that made it separate from Resident Evil 2 on PS1. And personally, I think PS1 was a little bit smoother, but PC version was a lot better in terms of running graphically. But there was another PC version that came out a lot later. This version is known as Source Next version among the fans. This version was released on 2006, and the developer Source Next released the game on PC with a lot of modifications that made the game much better. First of all, the resolution of the game was 640 by 480, and you needed 64 megabytes of RAM to run this game, which was not that much for 2006. The quality of full motion videos were much better in this version, and I don't know how they pulled it out, but it was amazing. One of the most amazing hassles that you will face running a PC version of Resident Evil 2 on a modern hardware is saving game. When you save the game and then come back later to load the game, you will not find your file. I remember I was able to solve this by changing the root and other things that I want to save my file, but I don't remember the specifications, so I suggest you to do the research before installing this game and expect to save and load it. Resident Evil 1 on Sega Saturn was a gem to behold for the fans of this doomed console. So, expectation for Resident Evil 2 on Sega Saturn was not that much out of the question. But unfortunately, people at Capcom decided not to go for this release. They even worked on a version for Sega Saturn, but based on what Shinji Mikami said, the graphic was much lower than PlayStation 1, and overall quality was not pleasing enough for the company to risk everything and release this game on Sega Saturn. Instead, they released this game on another Sega console, which was the last console of this company. Sega Dreamcast was the host of Resident Evil 2, and one of the best versions of this game is present on this console. There were multiple amazing features on this version. For example, if you had a VMU, then you could see the character's health live displayed on this VMU. This was a cool feature for that time, and I believe that it's still cool to see some small touches such as this one. And let's not forget, the whole game was running on a smooth 60 frames per second. To be honest, I still prefer to play this game on Dreamcast, and the cost for this game is around $100 as a full pack. But don't forget that if you get the full pack of this game, you will get a demo version of Resident Evil called Veronica, which worth a shot to see how much amazing this game has improved in some few years. The next big company that went for Resident Evil 2 was Nintendo. They released this game for two of their consoles. Nintendo GameCube, and before that Nintendo 64. Let's tackle Nintendo GameCube before Nintendo 64 because that one has an amazing thing to talk about. Technically speaking, the GameCube version of Resident Evil 2 is exactly the same as DualShock version that was released on PlayStation 1. So we can say there's not much to talk about because there is no difference at all. The same graphic style, the same output, the same pacing, everything was the same. But the most amazing version that Nintendo hosted was Nintendo 64. Some people call this version impossible port because the size of any cartridge for Resident Evil 2 on Nintendo 64 was almost around 64 megabytes. This amount of space is not even enough to think about porting this game. To understand it better, you should consider that Resident Evil 2 on PlayStation had more than 350 megabytes of data for each disc, but they put everything in one tiny cartridge with 64 megabytes of size. That's mind-blowing even on today's standards, and how they achieved it was beyond the skills of a normal programmer. 20 employees of Capcom in Angel Studios, which was one of the internal studios of Capcom, released this game after 1 year of working and spending $1 million budget to create one of the most amazing ports that the world have ever seen. They had to sacrifice something to gain such amazing feat, and as a result, the cutscenes and the audio of this version is horrible when you compare it to the other versions. But when you think about the size and what they have done, you will appreciate what you receive. There were some neat features as well. You could change the color of your blood, and you had a new mode. You could randomize many aspects of the game and make any playthrough a new and somehow fresh experience. Another amazing thing that this version had was 16 new game documents. These documents were known as X-Files, and they were written by one amazing and talented guy called Tetsuro Oyama. The only annoying thing that I found on this version was the lack of extreme battle mode, which was, a pity, but you have to consider the size of the data they could work with. The last port that we want to talk about is one of the most horrible ports that I've ever seen. If you have ever heard about Tiger Electronics, you know that their name is almost opposite of what we call quality. And their handheld version of consoles was a terrible thing to behold. They have created a completely new version of this game in 2.5D style. And based on the lack of color in this console, you could see what would happen to our favorite characters. First of all, you could play only as Leon Scott Kennedy, and the Leon Scott Kennedy in monochrome is not that appealing to watch. On the other hand, many aspects of the games are gone. Many things, many locations, many gameplay elements, many enemies, all of them are gone, and the pacing is mind-boggling. It's so slow that you will hate the game, you will hate yourself, and you will hate Gamecom after all these other things. If you are so curious to play it, just give it a shot, use an emulator or something and play it. But if you want to experience Resident Evil 2 and hate Resident Evil series, then go and definitely play this version. If you are a fan of Resident Evil, avoid it at all costs. Before we end this video, I have to say that I have to mention a tech demo for Game Boy Advance. Resident Evil 2 on Game Boy Advance had a tech demo around 1999, and this version was something quite amazing if they could pull it off. It was very different from what you see in the original Resident Evil 2, and it was not a mind-boggling and shitty version such as Gamecom's version. But in the end, they could not pull it off, and people at Capcom decided not to go for this version, so we did not see the game. In the version they have released, you could play only in 2 of the rooms, and you could use the inventory in, some specific manner that was not complete, obviously. But nonetheless, it's another piece of history and a great what-if scenario. Maybe in another universe, we have a complete version of Game Boy Advance Resident Evil 2 as an amazing piece of memory for people. Who knows? Thank you for watching this video. Please like it and share it with your friends so we can know more amazing audiences such as yourself. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already and click on the bell icon down below so you get notified about our latest videos. This is Daniel from Retro Haven, and I will see you guys in the next video.